So, covered the upcoming Achnosis Sefer Torah, I wanted to discuss some of the shaylas that are Nageya. Primarily the last mitzvah in the Torah, which the Chinuch brings down in mitzvah Tofrei Shid Gimel, where the Chinuch tells us, Shenitztavinu liyos lechol ishmi Yisrael Sefer Torah. That means every Yid, every male Yid, has an obligation to write a Sefer Torah. Right? We sang that song a couple of times, I think, by many of the Gedolim that we were zoichet to go to write oisis in a Sefer Torah, beautiful Sefer Torah that we're zoichet to have many Gedolei Yisrael having written an ois in there. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there's an obligation for every year to write a Sefer Torah. And it's an obligation for every single person, every Jewish male, adult, to write a Sefer Torah. And even though you yourself maybe cannot write one because maybe you're not a trained sofer, but you can get a shliach, shluchah shalodem k'moisai. Just like every other halacha, you can appoint somebody else in order to do the mitzvah for you. You get a sofer, you hire him, whether you specifically hire him as your sofer to write your Sefer Torah, or maybe simply you just pay him the money to write you a Sefer Torah, which is basically the same thing. You've appointed him, you do this. The question Rabbi says is an obvious question. If this is an obligation, like any other obligation, there's an obligation to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach, Daraisa. There's an obligation to shake a lulav and nesuk hadasim ba'aravos on the first day of Sukkot, Daraisa. Amongst many, many Daraisas that all of us are very makbid to keep. Some of them we cannot. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash and a Chanami. Unfortunately, as of this morning, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Beis Hashem later on today, it will be here, and we'll have Karbonis and Kohanim and the Shechina and everything else. But until that time, as of now, until now, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. So there's certain mitzvahs we cannot keep. Why do we not do this mitzvah? What's the pshat where every single person doesn't try to amass enough money to go and write himself, train himself to write, or get somebody to write it for him, own, buy a Sefer Torah, put it in a yeshiva, shul, whatever it may be, and do this mitzvah? It's one of the mitzvahs like all the other mitzvahs. What's the difference between this mitzvah and the other mitzvahs? That this one seems to be like certain people do it, you know? There's certain people have their thing, they give Sefer Torah, it's a beautiful zach, that's for them. Oh, but for me, whatever. I'm not even discussing the money aspect of it. What's pshat why it's not, sort of drilled in that this is one of the mitzvahs that Be'ez Hashem, if you have enough money, avada, that's what you have to do. So there are a few tirutzim. Even though avada lechatchila, a person, yes, is meant to make this mitzvah behidurai in the right way, which Be'ez Hashem, we're going to see this with our own eyes on Sunday, b'siyata d'shmaya. But lemaisa, what's the pshat why we don't? So the most famous answer, although there are many, is the Rosh. The Rosh brings down, by the mitzvah of Sefer Torah, he brings down that you have to understand. The reason why the Torah wanted Klal Yisrael, every Yid in Klal Yisrael, to write a Sefer Torah, was simply so that he could learn from it. Because otherwise, what did you have to learn from? So if a Yid writes a Sefer Torah, either himself or gets a shliach, a Sefer to do it for him, he has in his house a Sefer Torah, he can open it up, boom, he can start learning the mitzvahs, he can start learning the Torah Hashem. Zog the Rosh, since nowadays we have other Svarim, we have Chumashim, we have Mishnayos, we have Gemaras, Zog the Rosh, so that took the place of mitzvahs, Chesivas Sefer Torah. Because the same way, the reason why Chazal wanted us, and the Torah wanted us, to write the Sefer Torah, was in order to learn the halachas, how to live like a Yid, what to do. But if you could do that with opening up a Mikrois Kedolos, or a Mishnayos, or a Gemara, or Rishonim, Achronim, Poskim, Shulchan Aruch, whatever it may be, Gavaldik, Zog the Rosh, that nowadays you can mekayim the mitzvah of ksiva Sefer Torah by writing svarim, by buying svarim, by having svarim. Zuk the Rosh Memela, that's what it is, and therefore according to the Rosh, if a person buys himself a set of Chumashim, Mishnayos, Gemaras, Rishonim, Achronim, Poskim, whatever it is, then Lemaisa, and he learns them obviously, then he's mekayim this gavaldige mitzvah of ksivas Sefer Torah. However, a lot of Poskim argue with this. It could be there is a Maila, but you will carry the mitzvah in the same way. You carry the mitzvah the same way. The Beis Yosef, when the Beis Yosef brings down this Rosh, the Beis Yosef is Simon Ayin Reish, he's chaylik on the Rosh, and he says, hold on a second, you can't tell me the Rosh says the whole mitzvah has changed because the Metzias has changed. Just because the Metzias has changed in the world, that nowadays we have printed Seferim, so Memele we don't need to say for Torah. Can't be. The Beis Yosef wants to say Pshat in the Rosh, that what the Rosh meant was that in addition to the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, which Avada you should do, there's noch a mitzvah, which is a chelik of that, which is actually having other Svarim as well, and that's what the Rosh was doing. As I state in the Heilige Beis Yosef, that's what he said. In other words, the Rosh was just adding more mitzvahs. Right, so Avada's Ksiva Sefer Torah, but of course also the actual Svarim as well. Now that is one answer. Again, like I told you, there's many answers. One answer. Another answer would be the Heilige Shagas Aryeh. Shagas Aryeh brings down like this. We know that a Sefer Torah contains within it over 300,000 letters. Over 300,000 letters in every Sefer Torah. And the Gemara tells us in Kedushin Daf Lamed that although we have a Mesorah for every word in the Torah, what we don't have, what we're not an expert in, is the spelling of every single word. The Gemara says this. For example, the word oisam. Oisam is spelt with a vav, without a vav. So that's already, we have minhagim, we have exactly how we do it nowadays, and there are certain minhagim asfadim that do things slightly differently, but al koponim, we have our minhagim of what we do. But the Gemara already tells us that we have the words, but we don't have necessarily the spelling. We're not a baki in the spelling. Zug de Shagas Aryeh, Mordek Shagas Aryeh. He says that since we don't know the spelling in every word of the Torah, Mimela, we're not going to be able to mekayim the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah in the right way until we're able to know exactly how to spell every single word. So the Shagas Aryeh, that's another reason why people are not so makpid on this mitzvah, to make sure that they can fulfill it, because it could be that we're not fulfilling it anyway, because we know that if you miss one letter in a Sefer Torah, it's all over. So Mimela, we're not a baki anyway. As I stated in Shagas Aryeh, very, very interesting. There is another reason also, and that is we know that when it comes to a lav, a person is mechuyev to give every penny that he owns, not to be over on the lav. The Chofetz Chaim says this famously, for those of you that didn't get there yet, in Sefer Shmiras Haloshen, and the Chofetz Chaim brings this down, that if a person, for example, if a person's boss says to him, listen, I need to know this juicy piece of Lashon Hara. Tell me the juicy piece of Lashon Hara about what somebody else did, whatever it is. And you don't want to tell him. And you know that if you don't tell him, he's going to fire you. And if he fires you, you will not have a parnasa. And if you don't have parnasa, your children will be hungry tomorrow morning. They won't have anything to eat. So what most people say, well, it's probably okay. For the kids, parnasa, whatever, shalom bayis, it must be okay. Chofetz Chaim says, absolutely not. You're mechuyev to give up every fortune, every penny that you own, in order not to say that word of Lashon Hara, in order not to be over on a lav. However, when it comes to an asay, right, the Gemara tells us more than 20% you're not mechuyev to give. So if, for example, a person only owns $50,000 and a Sefer Torah is, let's say, $30,000, which it used to be, now it's changed already, but it used to be a few years ago, it used to be $30,000, $40,000, now it's already 70, 80, 90, but al kaponim, it used to be that amount of money, that's more than 20% of what I own, and maybe if it's more than 20% of what I own, to become an asay, I'm not mechuyev to do. So there are a couple of tirutzim, we've given 3 so far, of when a person, generally, why the olam are not so makbid to mekayim that. The shaila that people ask are 2 things. Number 1, let's say there's a shul, let's say there's a yeshiva, let's say there's a community, they get together, let's be mishtativ, let's all gather together, let's write a Sefer Torah. Everybody give in whatever it is, let's say $500, $1,000, whatever it could be, we'll get a group of the olam together, and we will write a Sefer Torah for us, for the yeshiva, for the shul, for the community, whatever it is that they're doing it for. Are you yotze the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah when you put your $1,000 or whatever it may be into the pot in order to buy b'shutvas, partnership, this Sefer Torah, subject to a major machlokas haposkim, whether you're actually going to be yotze the mitzvah in that case. What is a common question, which is negeya to us now, coming up for our hachnosa Sefer Torah, is what happens if a person, for example, fills in a letter in the Sefer Torah. If you fill in the letter of the Sefer Torah, are you considered to be that you wrote a Sefer Torah, and therefore right? Because as we said, the Gemara tells us if you miss one letter, the whole thing is possible, which means if you're the one that writes one letter, so Gavaldik, you basically finished it off. You did something for the Sefer Torah. Are you considered to be Va'ata Kisva Lechem as the Shira Azosh? I was Mekayim this mitzvah, Tofei should Gimel in the Chinuch, and Memela, it's Gavaldik. I was Mekayim the mitzvah, Ksiva Sefer Torah, when I write a letter in the Sefer Torah, right? So it's interesting. The Gemara in Menachos Daf Lamed tells us clearly that if you correct, not even if you write, but if you correct or fix up a letter, says the Gemara Menachos. Now we know that because all of you pretty much saw the Sefer Torah, that the Sefer Torah is written in a way that the Sefer, he left out not just whole letters, and he didn't outline them. He just left letters that were half done, they weren't completed. Right? For example, we saw the, what was it? Olive. Again? The aleph that wasn't connected, the shin, that the regel wasn't connected, all of these things. So there's no question, if you fix up, says the Gemara, a letter, you are ki'ilu fixing the Sefer Torah, ki'ilu you wrote the Sefer Torah. That is what the Gemara in Menachos Daf Lamed tells us. However, say the Rishonim, that's only if you own the Sefer Torah. That's only if it's your Sefer Torah. If it's your Sefer Torah that you own, and through that you correct or fix up a letter, then avada yoyitza, and avada yoyitza the mitzvah, ata kisu lechem, es hashira azois. But if you fix up a letter, if you fill in a letter of a Sefer Torah that belongs to somebody else, you're not yait to the mitzvah. It's not your Sefer Torah. It says lochem. It means for you. It belongs to somebody else. It's very nice of you to help somebody else fix his Sefer Torah. It's a wonderful act of chesed. But upon him, the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, you definitely don't have. By the way, one of the Gedolim mentioned this to us, but it's also mafurish in the poskim, and that is, it's a little bit of Gnevas Das, what they sometimes do by Achnosa Sefer Torah. But we heard from Malach Biederman yesterday. He said in Moed Kazakh, Chazam Sefer, that says that they had a Sefer Torah, they weren't sure whether or not it was from a Yid or a Goy, whatever it is. So how did they figure it out? How's it shaykh? It's not shaykh to know whether it came from a Yid or it came from a Goy. How am I meant to know? It's not like they come with the shtar, with a document, that authorization of who wrote it. Sometimes they do, but this one didn't. So what they do? Very simple. They looked at the end of the Sefer Torah, right at the end, the last pasuk, and they saw if it looks like a little bit of a mess over there, as a zicha kosher in Sefer Torah, because then all the Yidden writing at the end, right by the Sefer Torah, so that you know that's a kosher Sefer Torah. If it goes beautiful all the way to the end, then you know it's obviously a goyish Sefer Torah. I think some Sefer brings that down. We heard that from a Malach Biederman. But Al Kaponim, how do we get into that? So they do a Bissel Gnevas Das. What do? They write the whole letter. In other words, they'll write the aleph, and they won't fill in the ink. And this way, they bring everybody in, come, pictures, right, status, you write over there, you fill in the letter over there, it's beautiful. It's mamish gnevas das. Because the halacha is, anyone knows in Hilchas Kstam, that if you have a letter that is outlined, even though it's not filled in, it's 100% kosher. Okay, there's a shayla, machlokes, whatever, but according to many poskim, it's 100% kosher. So this that you're filling in, you're not even doing anything, b'chal. Therefore, our Sefer Torah, Baruch Hashem, the Sefer is a Choshev Yerushalayim, which we'll discuss in a moment. He dafka left letters that were not kosher. The letters, the way they are right now, as of this minute, are 100% posel. A reish that's not complete, a shin that the legs are not touching, an aleph, all of these things, 100% not kosher. So by actually fixing it up, avada, you're going to make it kosher in that case. Now, just agav, in some of the inyonim, again, we're not going to be able to go through all the halachas, but just a few things to mention. The Gemara in Eruvin Daf Gimel Amar Aleph, the Gemara in Eruvin tells us, Tanya, Omer Rebbe Meir, Kishabasi Eitzel Rebbe Shmuel, when I came to Rebbe Shmuel, Omer li b'ni, my dear son, ma melachtecha, what do you do? What's your job? Amarti lo, lav lavani, I'm a soifa, I write svarim, I write mezuzahs, I write tefillin. Omer li b'ni, avizoi b'melachtecha. Be very careful with your work, says the Gemara, because if you write a letter, extra letter, or you miss one letter, Zuk the Gemara, Nimtzas machriv eskol ha'olam kuloi. You're destroying the world. The Prima Godim brings down in Yeridea. The Prima Godim says that the idea of a Yerushalayim by Hilchos Sefer is more important than Shchita. We know the halacha by Shchita, that a Shochet has to be Yerushalayim. Right, there was a famous Maisa once where one of the head of the Achshemim came into one of his mashkichim, head mashkichim of a big factory that was in charge, a Rabba Machsha of a factory, and whatever, he wanted to make sure, and he was very makbid that all his Rabba Machsha, all of his mashkichim were Yirish Shamayim. So he used to do spot checks. So he actually, what he did was he stayed in a hotel nearby for Shabbos, because he knew the guy would then, Shabbos I'm good, and Motzei Shabbos there's no way the guy will get here by Sunday morning, so basically I'm good. He stayed in a place Shabbos so that he would be able to arrive 3 minutes after Shabbos went out to check on this Rav Amachsha, on this Mashkiach, to take a see what's going on over there. If he's Taka Yerushalayim, if you could trust him with his factory, with his Achsha. He walked into the house, right? Surprise visit. The guy was shocked. What do you mean? It's Motzah Shabbos. How'd you get here so quickly? And the guy stayed over Shabbos, right? He opened. He wanted to see the television in his hotel room. So he saw the television. It was covered over the towel. Oh, Baruch Hashem. He covered the television over the towel. That's gavaldik. Oh, but he knew better than that. He put his hand behind the back of the screen. He felt it was nice and hot. And therefore he said, aha, okay, versteht what's going on over here? And he fired him upon him. It's got to be a din of a Yerushalayim, right? Shteit mefurish, when it comes to stam, it's more choshev, zuk the prima godin, than shchita. Why? The shchita is only one nevela. Right, Nebuch, the person's eating nevela. I understand that. Oh, but when it comes to halachas of stam, if the person doesn't write it, he's not a Yerushalayim, he could do all sorts of shtick, and therefore not only is a person not yotze tefillin, he hasn't got mezuzah up in his house, even the Sefer Torah is making brachas levatola every single time they open up the Sefer Torah, many times during the week, which is obviously very damaging, which is why the Pri Megadim says it's very important for a person to have a Yerushalayim. I remember a fellow once that I was teaching told me that his shver is a Sefer. His shver is a Sefer. And he got married, and he was purchasing new mezuzahs for the whole house. It's like he was buying maybe 20, 25 mezuzahs for every Pesach, every entrance in the house. And he says to me that I happen to know his shver, a very good yid. He says to me, I don't think my shver my father-in-law, is it good enough Yerushalayim to fulfill the halacha and Shulchan Aruch that I should buy, stam from him, right? He obviously is waiting for me to buy the mezuzahs from me. He's going to make money from it, because obviously 20, 25 mezuzahs is a lot of money. It's gavaldik panasa. But I don't think it's a Yerushalayim. I think I'm going to buy it from someone else. So I told him, Einachanami, there's a gavaldik halacha of Yerushalayim. I happen to know your shver that he's okay. He fits the category. But you should know as well something else, and that is, there's kabbadas avicha v'samecha. Sometimes we get mixed up with some of the shailas and halachas that we're very in certain areas, but we tread on everybody else's toes at the same time. And you have to be careful, like my Rashiva of Shamberg used to say, when it comes to Echsherim and all sorts of things, Bed Odom Lechaveira is also halacha. And therefore, in Achanami, if you're going to upset your shver or anyone else in that way, just because you want this maila that you do think you don't have, then you've got to be very, very careful in that case. Rabbi said, just to end, one last thing, Zamotiga Rebbe Rabbinim. The Rebbe Rabbinim says, what's pshat, why Klal Yisrael are called Yehudim? Yehudim Beloshem with the Yud. Yud is the smallest letter of the Sefer Torah. So the Rebbe Rabbinim like this, because the Yud is the smallest letter. Every letter, as we saw, if you make it a bit longer, a bit shorter, no, nishkavelach, it's kosher, it's beseda, right? Even if it goes out of the line, whatever, nishkavelach. A Yud, you make a Yud a little bit more, you stretch it a little bit more, it's not going to work. It's already a vav, it's already a suffix reish, whatever it may be. So the Yud has to remain small. That's the Yisoid. And the Yehudis of the Rebbe Rabbinim is dafka from a lashon of Yud, because the Yid has to know. We might look at ourselves, we might feel that we're small, we're the smallest nation in the world, we're surrounded from all sides, from all the biggest nations all over the place. Oh, but Yid has inherent kedusha. A Yid has inherent gavaldik tzelem elikim. And therefore, if we understand that and we use that, but lashon Yehudi, that letter is kosher in the Sefer Torah only if it's in that way. You don't have to stretch yourself out more than anything else. You are inherently gavaldik, kadosh, and pure. Be'ez Hashem, we'll continue Mitzvah Hashem another time.